Well, good day to you. It is May the 19th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. My name is Gary Willing. Welcome to Search for Signs. And I just want to point out real quick for those people who are new, if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, you want to get some background information about what he has to teach humanity and the priorities that he has for humanity and that kind of stuff. If you want to see if there's any truth to this information, don't take my word for it. Investigate it for yourself. I've included links in the description portion of every one of these videos that take you to websites that talk about this information in some way. So the best website to get the best background information is, of course, the Share International website. But you can get information about what I talk about from the other sites, like the Wikipedia page that talks about the Marshall Plan. I talk about that all the time in reference to the principle of sharing and those kind of things. That's why I put them in there. So hopefully you'll check it out. They're all free. Now, you want to come back and ask me a question. Post your question in the comment section. I'll try to answer it in the next video. You can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com if you don't want to talk about it in a video or if it's lengthy or something like that. If you just want to let me know what you think, post a comment. All right. Now, Alfred, what did you ask? You had a few questions about it, the last video I put up. At minute 24, you talk about the forces of darkness. How else are they operating other than finances? What do these forces of darkness want? Who are they? Let's start with the who are they. And this is my limited understanding of who they are. Okay, they're kind of, even in my mind, kind of these hidden figures and those kind of things. But according to Benjamin Creme, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, there's a tiny group of masters that are not a part of the Masters of Wisdom that I always talk about, that Maitreya is the head and leader of, who are, their responsibility is to keep the planet together physically. And they are the lords of materiality. They are remnants from the previous solar system when involution, which is spirit going into matter, was the highest form of spirituality. Now, I have no idea or concept or vision of what that would look like, but I can only guess. And to be honest, if I had to choose which solar system I want to evolve through, I would say this one would be more to my liking, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it was a beautiful place to live at that time. I have no idea. All I know is I prefer the evolution, spirit going out of matter into spirit, and that kind of thing, versus spirit going into matter and that kind of stuff. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now, they do, like I said, their purpose really is to keep the planet physically together, and they do that, and that's their work and activity that they do. Now, it becomes evil when their work and activity kind of spills over and they start to influence humanity, which is on the evolutionary arc. And when they do that, it slows down the evolution of humanity. And they've been working in that way for quite some time. And I want to say, probably if I had to guess, their influence over humanity really started to take place during the time of Atlantis, millions of years ago. And their influence was less than, let's say, the forces of evolution or the Masters of Wisdom was over humanity. And as time went on, eventually their influence equaled the forces of light or the Masters of Wisdom's influence over humanity. And there really was no clear influential winner over humanity. We were used both by, half by the forces of darkness, half by the Masters of Wisdom. And then there was a great war that happened not long before the destruction of Atlantis, that the forces of light and the forces of darkness kind of went at it. And it resulted in a stalemate. There was no clear winner on either side. And they both agreed to really not influence humanity directly and work more indirectly. And that's why the Masters of Wisdom retreated to their very, very, very remote abodes in the mountain and desert regions around the world, and the forces of darkness did the same thing. And then their influence was indirect. And you can see the working, and I'll talk about some of the work and activity of the forces of darkness in the last century or so, okay? Because it's really playing out today and what we're seeing today. But the Masters of Wisdom have always had the upper hand on the forces of darkness. It's just that because of the materiality and the materialism of humanity, that's the only way that they have an influence over humanity. So they can't influence or limit the work of the masters. They can only keep humanity enthralled. And one way they do it is by fear. Okay, so they generate fear in humanity, and that keeps humanity stuck. Now, you asked in what other ways what's the question exactly? So my phone just went out. Okay, so how else are they operating other than finances? So how else are they influencing humanity? They're influencing humanity in not only the financial or economic realm, but also in political, in the politics around the world, and in the religious groups. And I'm sure in other areas, because what they really want is just more power and more influence over humanity. Every time Maitreya would make any kind of inroads into with humanity, they would counteract it with something. It happened in the mid-'80s, or the early 80s, when Maitreya was about to have his first television interview. They influenced the Brits to attack the Argentinians, or vice versa, or whatever it was, with the Falkland Islands. And Ben's master said that was a direct result of the forces of darkness activity. Now, where it becomes very clear, if we were to go back to the time of World War I and World War II, you can clearly see each side. When it comes to things like the Ukrainian war or the war in Iraq, or those kind of things where there's this war on terrorism, a lot of times those lines can become blurred, right? But in World War II, it was very clear the side of which group was on which, right? The Axis powers were on the side of the Lords of Materiality, and they were influencing them and supporting them, and then the forces of light, or the Masters of Wisdom, were supporting the Allies. Doesn't mean that the Allies were 100% good, and it doesn't mean that every single person that was in Germany, Japan, and Italy was bad. It just means that they were influencing the work and activity of the political groups to do what they did. Okay, so, but it was a ancient battle that had been waging on for hundreds or over 100,000 years, but it resurfaced on the physical plane during World War I and World War II. Now, the Allied powers, of course, defeated the Axis powers, but they didn't destroy them. And it was hoped that their influence over humanity would have been reduced to such a degree that Maitreya could have come out about 5 years after World War II. That was the hope. What happened in reality is the Cold War started up. And that was obviously nothing good came out of the Cold War, right? So it was quite a destructive era of time, and tension, and disturbed the peace that had been kind of created after World War II. And it wasted billions or trillions of dollars. It cost millions of people's lives, those kind of things. And so it was nothing but a bad result of what was happening. And the Cold War was a direct result of the work and activity of the forces of darkness. And so what happened after the Axis powers were defeated, and this is coming from one of the masters, the Master DK, whose a photograph, is actually at the very top above Maitreya. That was who said it through Alice Bailey. That the forces of the door was closing on the forces of darkness, meaning their influence over humanity was becoming almost destroyed. And they were able to kind of put their foot in the door and keep it from closing by their influence over the then Allied powers. So they can work on both sides. So it's not just, it kind of blurs after a while. But there were people here in the United States, Britain, France, and Europe who wanted to create a state of Israel. Now, I'm not anti-Semitic. I have nothing against Jewish people, nothing against their faith. But according to the masters, the Zionist movement, which is the movement that created the state of Israel and has been sustaining the state of Israel up until now, was supported by the forces of darkness. And they knew that it would destabilize peace not only in the Middle East, but all around the world. And so it kept their, like I said, the door was closing on them, and they put their foot in there, and it kept their it kept the door from closing on their influence on humanity. And then those 3 points of darkness that influenced the Axis powers of the Nazis in Germany, the fascists in Italy, and the militarists in Japan resurfaced again. One in the Zionist movement in Israel, the other one in Eastern Europe, somewhere around Bosnia or Yugoslavia at the time. Now it's Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia. And then the third one is in the Pentagon. So just because I talk about the forces of darkness in the Pentagon does not mean I'm against the American people, does not mean I'm against America. It just means that group of people known as the military-industrial complex, or the Pentagon, is being extremely influenced by the forces of darkness. And you can see what's been going on and how their influence has really brought humanity to the brink of destruction over the past 70 or so years since its inception. President Eisenhower warned against the installation of the Pentagon and knew how dangerous it was going to be because he was a military guy. But he also had a good heart, I think. You know what I mean? And he saw the problem and the evil in all of that. But the building of the Cold War, like I said, was under the direct influence of the forces of darkness. The masters tried to counteract that. There were times when that Cold War nearly destroyed life on planet Earth. The first one was the building of the Berlin Wall. It created such a tension between the East and the West. And the other one was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And had it not been for the work and activity of the masters, the Space Brothers, and certain initiates and disciples in key areas in not only the United States but in Russia, we would have destroyed ourselves. So that's why Maitreya had to come back so quickly, is because they saw that there was a possibility that humanity could destroy ourselves had he not come back into the world. By him coming back into the everyday world, that guaranteed that we would not do that. Now, the other thing too, and now just a quick side note that Benjamin Creme talked about at one of the conferences, is Kennedy is known for making this wonderful speech after the Cuban Missile Crisis had ended. And he uses, and I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the order in which he says this, but he goes, we all cherish our children's future. We all breathe, how did he put it? You know, we basically talking about the unity of humanity, you know, where he says, we all love our children, we cherish their future, we all breathe the same air, I think is something to that effect. I don't think that's exactly how he said it, but it doesn't matter. For the point of this discussion, according to Benjamin Creme's master, that was written by a Venusian who was working as a mid-level diplomat in the Kennedy administration. Kennedy had no idea who this person was, where he had come from. He looked like an ordinary person, right? But he apparently got Kennedy's ear, and there was some more things that he had suggested to Kennedy to say in this wonderful speech. But those are the things that stayed in there. We all breathe, we all cherish our children's future, and we all breathe the same air. Talking about the unity and oneness of humanity. But anyway, to get back to the Cold War, after the Cold War ended, with the fall of the communist bloc in the late 80s, Maitreya said that energy that caused that military buildup went all around the world and tried to find what he said was a new womb, and went right into the stock markets of the world. And in the late 80s all the way to now, they've gone up and 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 up. And at the time, if you remember, if you can go back to the 80s, the stock markets kind of had their place, but they weren't as dominant as they are today. They didn't take precedent over everything with the news. Like, how is this war going to affect the markets? They didn't talk about it like that. So it switched. Now it's dominating everything of life on planet Earth are the markets in the world. What's this president going to do that's going to cause the markets to go up or down? And are we going to lose money or this, that, and the other, and those kind of things. But the other thing too, I think kind of unrelated to the politics and the economics of today is the religious side. And if we were to go back centuries, when the church was really just a little cult talking about Jesus and the love of humanity and those kind of things and some of his teachings, it was decided upon at a certain point that they would make Jesus the only true Son of God. And there's a lot of different viewpoints of when it happened and all those kind of things, but it did happen at a certain point. And Jesus was an ordinary man, but just a great teacher, to being the absolute true Son of God from one day to the next, because the church decided on this, and they knew that it would give them power over the people, and it did. For centuries, they ruled over the people by their faith, by their belief that Jesus is the only true Son of God. They created this fear that if you don't give them their power and their devotion to the church, it was not to Jesus or Jesus's teachings, it was to the church, then you would go to hell for all eternity. It scared the crap out of people, and it still does to this day. That same master, the Master DK, talking about the forces of darkness, said that was the greatest triumph for the forces of evil, is when they monopolized spirituality and religion. And all the religions are guilty of this, but the Christians have kind of put it on steroids. Now we're seeing it, and it's not just under Trump. It actually happened quite a bit of time ago, where Christianity, economics is now moving into the political arena, and they're using Christianity to gain a political base over and keep their political base in line through fear, and you can see it. And Benjamin Creme talked about it and warned about the dangers of the Bush administration. They stole that election, according to Ben's master. They stole the election of 2000. They actually did not win it. It was Gore, according to Ben's master, who won the election. Then they stopped the vote. They had the key people in the courts, the Supreme Courts, to be able to stop the vote. They installed George W. Bush as the president, and it was disaster. It was a disaster. Because then 9/11 happened, and all this war on terror and all that kind of thing, and we really haven't recovered from I think the mishandling of everything with the Bush administration. But he said the Bush administration was heavily influenced by the forces of darkness, and they were using his religion against him, George W. Bush, and George W. Bush thought he was talking to God, but it was the forces of darkness that were talking to him. God would never tell anyone to go attack another country. Jesus would never tell anybody to go attack another country, but for him, he was being told by Jesus that to go do that was the best thing for this country, and it was the worst thing that could have happened. Millions upon millions of people died in Iraq that had nothing to do with 9/11, that were totally innocent. Cost this country a fortune, and we're still going to be paying for it for generations to come. Not only the negative karma that's coming back on this country for what we did and the crime that we did against Iraq. And then if you look at what the Republican Party has been doing over the past 20 some odd years, and now with Trump doing these things, you can kind of see the same thing. And they're using religion to hold the people in line. Now, the Democrats are corrupt. The Democrats are not the perfect party, and I'm not saying they are. And according to Ben's master, they too can be used by the forces of darkness, but not to the extent that the Republicans are. In fact, Ben's master said that every president from the installation of the Pentagon has been influenced by the Pentagon to some degree, meaning they've been influenced by the forces of darkness to some degree. But he said the Republicans seem to be more easily manipulated and influenced by that force. But if you look at, like the 3 points of darkness, right? What has the Pentagon done over the last 70 years but try to create this Pax Americana, all the military buildup, all the destabilizing this region, funding and giving guns to this region. I mean, it's an evil that's going on. It's destabilizing peace everywhere. All in the name of freedom and justice and peace. I mean, the people in the United States eat that up with a biscuit. Then you look at Eastern Europe, which was another point of darkness, with what happened around Yugoslavia with the genocides under Milosevic. I mean, it was an evil that happened. And then if you look at what's going on in Israel even today with the Palestinians and the injustice against the Palestinians. I'm not anti-Semitic. You can call me that if you want, but I'm just trying to clarify it from the master's point of view that it's a direct result of the forces of darkness. And they use it's funny that I think the one thing that the forces of darkness seem to use very well, very efficiently against humanity and certain people and certain groups of people is their victimhood. And by doing that, they justify all sorts of things that they normally probably wouldn't do if they didn't feel like they were a victim. And it's sad, but Israel's doing to the Palestinians exactly what the Nazis did to them. And they have no compassion toward these people. They keep medicine away from them. They keep, all these things. It's a crime. It's an absolute crime. I'm not against Israel, and I'm not against the people who live in Israel. I'm against the Zionist movement that's causing all these injustices against the Palestinians, destabilizing peace in that area. I'm against Milosevic creating a genocide against his people. I'm against the Pentagon and all that they've been doing over the decades. I'm not against Americans. I'm not against the American people. I'm not against the ideology of America. I'm standing up and voicing my concern for the work and activity of the Pentagon. And until that is contained and the influence of the Pentagon is no longer as strong as it is with our politicians in Washington, we're going to continue to live in the world that we're living in. And they have a stranglehold over those politicians to a large extent. In fact, actually, Ben's master said that the president doesn't run the country, the Pentagon does. It doesn't matter who the president is, really. And that's why some of the most left-leaning, progressive people in Washington end up going right in line with these wars and these things like this. It happened with the war on terrorism in Afghanistan and Iraq 20-some-odd years ago. Some of the most left-leaning Democratic members of Congress voted for the war. You know what I mean? So, and Bill Clinton did his thing. Obama did his thing. So they're just as guilty of it too, but you can see the influence and activity of the forces of darkness you can see, if you look historically at George W. Bush and how he did it and the direct result of what happened with him doing what he did, okay? And you can see kind of what's going on with Trump today doing this. And you can see the influence over Biden to some degree. You know what I mean? So I'm not excluding Biden of it. But funding wars here in Israel and funding wars in Ukraine isn't going to bring about peace, and it's not going to bring about justice. Only the principle of sharing will bring about justice. Does that make sense? So I think I answered that question. So their influence is not only over economics, but it's all in the economic tyranny of the worlds, in the markets of the worlds. It's also over politics and over religion. And if you look at all those three areas, the destruction, the injustice that those three institutions have been perpetrating on humanity as a whole, all over the world, not just in the United States, but all over the world, you can see the work and activity of the forces of darkness. But eventually, humanity's influence will their influence over humanity will lessen, and it will really start, I think, with the Day of Declaration. And if you look in the Bible, if you're a religious person, I'll kind of leave you with this thought. It's said in the Bible that the beast will be chained back for a time and a half, and there'll be a measure of peace. Most Christians who believe in the end times think that that's going to be about a 5 to 7 year period when the Alliance of Nations or something like this happens. So they don't trust anything that has to do with peace. They think that that's the work of the Antichrist, okay? But what it was really being said in the Bible was that there will be, for the time and a half is not just a few years, it's a few thousand years, all throughout the Aquarian Age and halfway through the Capricorn Age. And then the beast will be re-released, that Antichrist energy will be re-released again during halfway, like I said, about 3,000 or so years from now. And there will be another great war, but this time on the mental planes, not on the physical plane, not on the astral plane, but on the mental planes. And after the destruction of the forces of materiality, or the lords of materiality, or the forces of darkness, at that point, then humanity will, and the world will take a huge step forward, and there will no longer be, they will no longer influence humanity at all. And their work activity will be relegated to what they're supposed to do, which is keeping the world together and not influencing humanity, not keeping humanity going, moving forward and those kind of things. Does that make sense? So I tried to answer the question as best I could based on my limited understanding and knowledge of the forces of darkness. But the other, I was going to say too, Ben always said, don't worry about them. The masters can counteract what they do very easily, but what they can't do is violate humanity's free will, meaning the masters can't violate humanity's free will. And right now, the problem is not the forces of darkness; it's the inertia and the materiality of humanity. So tell humanity, tell your friends and family and coworkers about the need for peace, the need to maybe share to bring about justice, and that war is not the answer. And it might help the situation. I think it would help the situation, and not worry so much or, ruminate about what the lords of materiality are doing. Hopefully that helps. I love you guys. Take care. Enjoy the day, and we'll see you real soon. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.